I think it's one of the major issues is a simple competency problem for your average individual. So we've more or less outsourced everything important in our lives to somebody else or someplace else. And I grew up a little bit differently. I'm in Novi, but back when I lived here when I was younger, it was a smaller city. My parents, they have their own water well, they have their own septic system. My dad's an engineer, so he was always fixing stuff around the house. If the septic pump broke, my dad was up fixing the septic pump at 11 p.m. because we had to take a shower the next morning. Your average person that has city water and sewer and DoorDash and everything is provided, and so people just don't know. Your average person can't change the tire on their car, and that's why cars these days, they don't even put spare tires in them anymore because nobody knows how to fucking use them. So I think that's a big problem, is that the easier you make it for people to live their daily lives, the more they'll become reliant upon that, and the more resistant they will be to anybody trying to upset that balance. And so government has sort of installed itself as, well, we will raise your kids by, getting them into school as early as possible. In Michigan, they want to feed your kids as well in school with this garbage food that, you really shouldn't be even giving to prisoners, let alone kids. But they tout it as this big win. Now mommy and daddy can both have 60-hour-a-week jobs because, you can just drop your kid off at 6 a.m. when he's 4 years old at pre-K, and then, come back at like 6 p.m. and we will have raised your kid for you, and we will have fed your kid for you. And, who knows, like, where do you go from there? How do you install one more layer between the child and the parents as the government? So, it's just one example, but I think that's the main problem, is people are much less self-reliant now than they ever have been. And for sure, that's produced some great things for society. Like, I'm not a Luddite, I'm not going to go live like Ted Kaczynski in a cabin or anything like that. There are some parts about that sound glamorous, to be sure. But, I live in a modern house. I'm not, I have apps on my phone, like I fully embrace the modern world, but I do have solar panels. I have, a battery backup. I have a generator system. All that stuff I installed myself because I wanted to learn how to do it. I wanted to know how it worked in case it breaks down. I don't have to call somebody to come and repair it. I've always driven used cars, and I find great deals. You can buy some really cool, fast stuff if you're willing to do your own work. And not only do you have a lot more fun, but you learn along the way. And now not only can I repair cars, but I can fix, the broken dishwasher. I can repair something around the house without having to call a repairman or, buy something brand new. So I think that's the biggest problem, is people are just very accepting of the idea that government is here and they have a solution. And so we might as well just go with that and not try to reinvent anything of our own or try to learn how to do it ourselves. But as we know, there's no free lunch. It's just like, Facebook and the social media apps, they're not free. They're free because they're getting your data and they're reselling your data to somebody else, and that's how they're making revenue. So there really is nothing for free, but people honestly do see government as like a free provider because, your taxes come out before you even see them. Imagine how it would be if every week at the end of the week you had to actually go up to like some local, the IRS office next to the DMV and, cut them a check for the amount of taxes that you're paying after you've received it in your bank account. I think that would last all of a month and there'd be a civil war. I think people would lose their minds, but it's just out of sight, out of mind. And, unfortunately, I think it's probably not getting much better, but, with the proliferation of technology, there are more people who are connecting that see it from the other side, that people are coming up with better solutions on their own. And, homeschooling kids is the new big thing. Obviously, there's been a lot of move toward finding better ways to do that, being able to connect small community groups to be able to share resources and produce a much better product than what the government can provide, while being, fully in control of what they're learning and things like that. So I think there's good strides in some areas, but it's an all-encompassing problem. And unfortunately, it's so embedded that right now there's no way around it. But I think the digitization of finance is a big step. I think that's not just a small stepping stone. That's going up that's jumping up 3-4 steps on the staircase all at once, where when you control your own money, you have much more of an ability to make day-to-day decisions for yourself. So I think the sooner that happens, the better. And that's, I think, going to wake a lot of people up who really haven't thought about it at all. Central bank digital currencies, it's like, so you're going to put the government in charge of, there's like one weapons manufacturer, and it's the government AR-15 company, and now you got to buy your AR-15 from the government. Like, none of you would ever think that that was a good idea. Some of you stupidly thought that was a good idea with health insurance and healthcare, and look how that's been going, and not just here but most other places around the world. Look at the UK. I mean, it's a nightmare. I mean, look at Canada. You and I are not that far from Canada, and I talk to people all the time who have been on waiting lists for months to get an MRI that I could get in 20 minutes here if I wanted to. And yeah, I might have to pay a little bit for it, but it's gettable, and I can go do it without having to ask anybody for permission. So yeah, there's a lot there for sure.
How is it not spread? That's what I don't get. Like, as a business owner, I'll go to a convenience store and I'll say, hey, you guys accept Bitcoin? And they're like, no. Like eventually sometimes that I'll ask, but it's like, how does someone not take onto that right away?
And I think that's the biggest issue right now with Bitcoin is, it's very easy to get set up with a credit card processor, and you get yourself a little PIN terminal for your store, and yeah, you're paying 3% or whatever it is, but it's very seamless. It's very easy. You just set it up and plug it in and it works. And the guy comes in and sticks his card in the reader, and that's all that you need to do. There's no fussing about with the back end of the technology. So I think that's the biggest issue, is we just don't have the right hardware and software solutions right now. There's no company that's really put the effort into that I think is required to get widespread acceptance from the general public and people in small businesses to be able to work with it on a day-to-day basis. And then I think also just the general public knowledge of how it works. People are very resistant to change, especially when you're talking about money. It's one thing if you invested in, HD DVD instead of Blu-ray, like, okay, you can chalk it up to, I'm going to throw out this HD DVD player that I overpaid for, and I'm going to have to go buy this Blu-ray, but it's 2 years later, so it's $39, and who the fuck cares, right? It is what it is. But, when you're talking about people, especially, middle America, where it's not like they have a huge amount of money in their checking account to just play around with. And, well, I bought some Bitcoin, and it's kind of like floating around in cyberspace, and I got it in this cold storage wallet, and I don't really know it's there, but they say it's there, and supposedly it's there. But if I want to, get actual dollars for it, I still got to go to like Coinbase or something like that. So there's just a lot of steps in the process. And, I worked in the insurance industry for 10 years before this. And one of our primary products for that company was 401k plans. And even something as simple as an employee 401k plan, your average guy working in a machine shop, let's say he's making 70 or 80 grand a year. He's putting 3% into his 401k so he can get his employee match. So he's putting away like 6% of his income per year into this stock fund that he never logs into. He hardly ever makes any changes. And I mean, like, I used to laugh about it. It's like, man, how these people, how are they so stupid? Like, don't they care about their retirement? But the reality is, like, dude, this guy's got 3 kids. He's got a job. He's got to take his kids to soccer practice. He's got to, fix the door on the shed this weekend. And things just fall to the wayside. But he can log into his bank account app on his phone and check his balance real quick. He can move money around. He can pay bills. And so I'm 39. So I exist in a space where I had a cell phone when I was 14, but, it had 200 minutes a month. I wasn't allowed to call anybody except for my parents. Like you could barely send text messages. But my father's a computer engineer. So we had a computer in our house when I was maybe 8 years old, which was very uncommon at the time. And so I've experienced going from, 56K modems up to modern, 5G broadband, Starlink, all this stuff. And I think I'm I would say like the millennial generation is probably the first generation that's really going to be able to accept and use and work with Bitcoin on a daily basis and not be so overwhelmed and not have to suffer from, teaching old dogs new tricks kind of an issue. So I think part of it is just a matter of time, but that's the other issue is just, public acceptance of new technology, especially when it comes to money and banking. It's going to be a very, very slow rate of acceptance versus, a consumer product of some kind where they can make a mistake and it's not that big of a deal. Part of the problem is, after the creation of the Federal Reserve and now we can just print unlimited money, we see bailouts all the time for big companies that make mistakes. And so that's really part of the issue. We should have had a, black swan event of some kind probably 20 years ago, I mean, back in the GM bailouts, or way before that. But because you can just print up another $1 trillion, we keep delaying that from happening in a natural sense. And now we've made people so afraid of it happening that I think they almost are resistant to the idea of something replacing their paper money because they perceive that changeover is going to have a lot of, suffering and bad times along with it. And maybe it will, maybe it won't, maybe it needs to, but your average person doesn't really want to do that. As much as we in the 2A community, you have people talking about the Boogaloo and the Civil War and all that. And it's like, man, guys, first of all, none of you really want that, to be honest with you. Go look at any country that's been through a civil war. Like, you really do not want that. And number two, you really have no idea what that's going to look like. And I think that's what people perceive a change in the money system would bring, some sort of a major collapse, 50% of the population is dead, nobody can get food, all those kinds of things. So people are a little unwilling to get out of the box and look around.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.